You like that? Pulled up a chair for you. The Ohio Bigfoot flap of March 2026. 8 sightings, 5 days, one strange corridor through northeast Ohio. In March of 2026, something moved through Portage and Trumbull counties, or at least that's what multiple witnesses claimed. Within days, the story was everywhere. Local news, even national outlets picked it up. Social media did what social media always does. It turned a mystery into a wildfire. But here's what makes this case more interesting. The witnesses weren't all Bigfoot hunters. One was a self-described skeptic who said she doesn't believe in Bigfoot, but still couldn't explain what she saw. One was a mother driving home with her 18-year-old daughter, and according to the follow-up, they didn't just see something near the road, they had to drive around it. Another witness described a detail after the initial report that should immediately grab the attention of anyone familiar with the Patterson-Gimlin film. The creature allegedly didn't turn its head like a person, it turned its shoulders. So what are we dealing with? A real Bigfoot flap? A chain of misidentification? A viral story that grew faster than the evidence? Or something stranger? A case where the witnesses may be sincere, the reports may be detailed, and the evidence may still not be enough. Stay with me, because the most important part of this case is not what the people saw. It may be how the story traveled. And just when it looked like the March flap had gone cold, new claims surfaced on May 3rd, involving alleged footprint photos, strange howls, and renewed activity between Akron and Youngstown. We'll get there, because that update may not prove the case, but it absolutely changes the conversation. How the flap began. Before we talk about Bigfoot, we need to talk about the chain of custody. When you're investigating a strange claim, the first question is not, do I want this to be true? The first question is, where did the information come from? According to the documentation, the first report was captured through Scott Tompkins and the Bigfoot Mapping Project. That matters because it means the first sighting was logged before the story exploded nationally. From there, Jeremiah Byron of the Bigfoot Society became the central collection point for the reports, receiving sightings through several channels: the Bigfoot Mapping Project, TikTok messages, phone contact, emails. Glenn Adkins of the Ohio Squatch Project later became the boots-on-the-ground investigator for at least part of the case. His background is notable: former police officer, park ranger, firefighter, and longtime associate of Bigfoot expeditionist Robert W. Morgan. So this was not just one anonymous post floating around the internet. There was an actual documentation chain, but that chain also introduces the biggest weakness in the entire case. Most of the reports flowed through one central funnel: the Bigfoot Society's founder, Jeremiah Byron. Now, to be fair, I want to be precise here. Jeremiah Byron does not appear to have credibility problems on record. The issue is not that the reporter is discredited. The issue is the nature of the evidence itself. Anonymous, self-reported encounters are extremely difficult to verify, independently especially. So when multiple reports flow through one central outlet, that becomes a limitation of the evidence, not necessarily a limitation of the person documenting it. That distinction matters. If we're gonna take this seriously, we have to do two things at the same time. We have to listen carefully to the witnesses. We also have to admit that witness testimony filtered through a single reporting channel is not the same thing as independently verified evidence. That's the tension in this case. And once you see that tension, the entire Ohio flap becomes more interesting. Not all 8 cases are equal. Here's where I think a lot of Bigfoot coverage goes wrong. It treats every report like it deserves the same evidentiary weight. It doesn't. Some reports are detailed, some are thin. Some come from people with no apparent interest in Bigfoot. Others come from people who were already looking. Some include multiple witnesses. Others are one-sentence claims with no detail. So instead of walking through all 8 cases as if they're 8 equal pillars holding up the same roof, let's rank them. A few are genuinely compelling. A few are interesting but limited. At least one is so thin that it barely helps the case at all. Let's start with the strongest. The most cinematic report in the entire flap happened on March 9th around 8 p.m. along Route 303 between Streetsboro and Hudson near Tinkers Creek. The witnesses were a mother and her 18-year-old daughter driving home. They weren't Bigfoot researchers. They weren't out looking for anything. They were in a car moving through a low-lying wooded and swampy area when they saw something in the road. According to the original message, both witnesses saw a tall brown figure with very long arms walking strangely. The mother described the movement as stilt-like and said both she and her daughter were stunned. That alone would be interesting, but the phone follow-up is where this case becomes one people remember. According to Byron's follow-up notes, the figure was in their lane of traffic, walking toward them. They had to swerve around to pass the animal. The witness said the daughter was close enough that she could reach out her window and touch it if she wanted to. The figure allegedly had extremely long arms, strange stilt-like legs, and a blurred face with no visible eyes. After they passed it, the witness looked in the rearview mirror, but it had disappeared into the dark and swampy area. That's a remarkable report. Not proof, but remarkable. That's why this case matters more than some of the others. Two witnesses saw it at the same time. They're not actively hunting Bigfoot. The encounter happened at close range. The thing was not merely glimpsed in the trees. It was in the road. They had to physically navigate around it. That's why this encounter deserves special attention. At the same time, we still have to ask the obvious question. If it was that close enough to touch, why is there no photo? I understand in the age of AI, sometimes everything is seen as fake, but a photo would be nice. That's the problem that haunts most of these cases. Fear can freeze people. Surprise can shorten a moment. Driving at night while encountering something unexpected is not the same thing as calmly documenting wildlife from a safe distance. But in 2026, no photo is still a serious weakness. So this case is powerful as testimony. It's not powerful as physical evidence, though. That distinction is everything. The second report that deserves special attention is case number 4 near Headwaters Trail and Hankey Road. This one involved two hikers. One remained anonymous. The other, Jacob Taylor, reportedly said he was willing to go on record. According to the original account, the two were hiking near Garrettsville when they noticed movement near the tree line, roughly 25 to 30 feet away. They saw what they described as a large upright figure completely covered in black hair, somewhere around 8 to 10 feet tall. The figure had very broad shoulders, unusually long arms, and allegedly moved on two legs. The witnesses also reported a musky smell and a deep grunt before the figure stepped back into the trees. That's already one of the more detailed reports. But once again, the follow-up detail is what makes it stand out. During the phone follow-up, the anonymous witness reportedly said the creature could only turn its head by turning its shoulders, not just its neck. The witness also described the movement as strange, almost like it was on stilts. Now that detail matters because some Bigfoot researchers have argued that the Patterson-Gimlin subject appears to turn in a similar shoulder-led way rather than a normal human neck turn. But we need to be careful here. Similarly is not proof. A witness description sounding like a famous Bigfoot detail doesn't automatically authenticate it. It could be coincidence, could be interpretation, could be contamination of the witness having prior exposure to Bigfoot lore. But according to the notes, this detail was volunteered in follow-up rather than prompted. That makes it worth paying attention to. The strength of the case is the combination of proximity, two witnesses, multiple sensory details, and a specific movement description. The weakness is just as obvious. At 25 to 30 feet away, in broad daylight or late morning, conditions with two people present, there's still no photo. That doesn't kill the report, but it does put a ceiling on how much weight you can place on it. The next case is important for a different reason. Not because it's the most detailed, because it gives us one of the most contactable witnesses in the flap. Case number 2 involved Dylan Obney, who reportedly saw something on March 7th in the Manaway area woods. He described hearing heavy, slow footsteps and then seeing something tall move between two trees, roughly 40 to 50 yards away. It was described as 7 to 8 feet tall, covered in dark brown hair with long arms, and it made a deep grunt before disappearing. Obney was identified by name, quoted by the Portager, and described himself as not a fan or believer, but someone who saw something larger than a person, hairy and Sasquatch looking. That matters. Named witnesses carry more weight than anonymous ones because they're more accountable. But even here, we need to slow down. There were reportedly oversized, muddy footprints associated with this encounter in secondary reporting, but those March 6th through 10th footprints were not documented in the primary final report with measurements or photographs or cast. So Obney is important because he's named and potentially interviewable, but the evidence attached to the case is still limited. That's the pattern we keep running into. The witness side gets interesting. The physical evidence side keeps lagging behind. The skeptic at the window. Case number 5 is one of the most human reports in the entire flap. A homeowner in Windham, described as a skeptic who doesn't believe in Bigfoot, allegedly saw something from inside her home through a living room window. The figure was around 100 feet away, across a clearing, roughly 6 feet tall, brown-haired, bipedal, and running with an extremely long stride. The total sighting lasted about 6 seconds. Her reported statement was, "I know what I saw, but I don't know what I saw." That line sticks because it sounds like genuine bewilderment. Not certainty, not performance, bewilderment. This case also matters because Glenn Adkins reported investigating it in person, making it one of the better documented follow-ups in the March window. But as evidence, this case has limits. A 6-foot bipedal figure is not extraordinary in height. A 6-second sighting through a window across a clearing leaves room for misidentification. The skeptical profile of the witness makes the report more interesting. It does not make it conclusive. Still, cases like this complicate the story. Because if this were just Bigfoot enthusiasts feeding each other stories online, this witness would not fit neatly into that pattern. The dog that retreated in terror. Case 7 happened early on March 10th in Newton Township, Trumbull County. A homeowner let out their German Shepherd around 4 a.m. According to the report, the dog lunged toward the woods, then retracted in terror, shaking uncontrollably inside the house. The witness then saw a massive figure crashing through heavy brush at high speed. The figure was described as a large black silhouette or shadow, possibly around 10 feet tall. This is an interesting report because animal reactions are a recurring feature in strange encounter stories. A dog reacting with fear can feel persuasive because animals are not trying to get podcast attention. But animal behavior is also hard to interpret. Dogs can react intensely to bears, coyotes, strange people, unfamiliar sounds, or scents we can't even detect. The witness reportedly knew bears were present on the property and believed what they saw was much bigger than any bear they had ever encountered. That makes the report worth noting. But because it happened at 4 a.m. and involved a silhouette crashing through brush, it's not one of the strongest visual cases. It supports the atmosphere of the flap. It doesn't anchor the case. Now let's talk about the weaker material. Case number 3 is the weakest report in the entire dossier. The witness reportedly submitted a very brief account through the Bigfoot Mapping Project, saying they saw an 8-foot Sasquatch-looking creature and ran away. That's essentially it. The account is short, contains little detail, almost nothing to evaluate. On its own, it shouldn't move anyone's confidence one way or the other. That doesn't mean the person lied. It means the report is evidentially thin. Case number 8, near Lake Milton, is more detailed, but still limited. The witness reportedly observed a dark reddish-brown figure from a window about 200 feet away. It ran with a heavy forward lean toward a pond and disappeared under branches and underbrush. The witness ruled out deer or bear based on the shape and arms, but the distance remains a serious limitation. At 200 feet through a window with a moving subject, identification becomes really difficult. Case number 1 is also interesting but complicated. It was the first report, and it came from someone associated with a cryptid research organization who was already conducting fieldwork in the area. The subject was reportedly stationary in a wood line about 120 yards away, then moved off, apparently realizing it was being watched. The positive side is that a field researcher may be more observant and aware of their surroundings. The negative side is that a motivated observer may also be more likely to interpret ambiguous details through the lens of what they're looking for. So, here's the honest breakdown. The strongest cases are number 6 and number 4. The case we can explore is number 2, they offered their name. The most psychologically interesting is case number 5. The atmospheric support case is number 7. The weaker cases are number 3 and number 8. And to some degree, number 1 because of distance, brevity, or motivated observer concerns. That ranking matters, and unfortunately, they're all weak circumstantial eyewitness testimony funneled through one outlet. So what, if anything, corroborates? Not proof, corroboration. There's a difference. The first point is geographic coherence. According to the analysis, the reports appear to move east-southeast through a corridor from the initial Portage County area toward Garrettsville, Windham, Streetsboro, Newton Township, and Lake Milton. This movement has been interpreted as roughly consistent with large animal movement through the Headwaters Trail Greenbelt corridor. That doesn't prove an animal was there, but it's more interesting than 8 random dots scattered across the state. The second point is repeated movement language. Several witnesses described strange gait, long arms, stilt-like movement, or shoulder-led turning. The gait consistency across cases number 2, 4, and 6, with the torso pivot detailed in case 4, reportedly volunteered during follow-up. Again, not proof, but pattern matters. The third point is witness profile. Several witnesses were not described as Bigfoot hobbyists. The Route 303 mother and daughter reportedly had no background in Bigfoot and had not seen Byron's videos before their encounter. The Windham homeowner, described as a skeptic, Dylan Obney, was identified as someone who was not a believer per se. That doesn't make them right, but it makes the case more interesting than if the witness were already deep inside Bigfoot culture. The fourth point is the independent BFRO report from Ashland County on March 15th. This report didn't come through the Bigfoot Society cluster. It involved Thomas Paulchell, identified as a college professor, and his wife. They reportedly heard loud wood knocks and later found several large tracks that were barefoot, measuring 14 to 16 inches in length, pressing into wet ground with possible toe impressions and no claw marks. That's not a direct confirmation of the March 6th to 10th Portage flap. Ashland is roughly 60 miles away, but it's interesting because it comes shortly after the flap, through a different channel and near a previously documented sighting zone according to the BFRO investigators' notes. So the flap has some corroborative texture, geography, repeated descriptions, non-enthusiast witnesses, a separate post-flap report. Enough to make the case interesting, not enough to settle it. What does not corroborate? Now we need to turn the lights on, because the witnesses are serious. First, no photos or video from the March 6 to 10 window. In 8 sightings across 5 days, in the age of smartphones, no image of the subject was captured. That is the single biggest weakness in the case. Yes, encounters can happen fast. Yes, fear and confusion can lock people up. Yes, a driver at night should not be expected to become a wildlife photographer while avoiding something in the road, but still, no images across 8 reports is a major problem. Second, no casts from the main March window. There were references to oversized muddy footprints connected to case number 2 in secondary reporting, but those tracks were not documented in the primary report with measurements or photographs or casts. Third, most of the reports were centralized through one outlet. Again, that's not accusation against Byron. It's a limitation of the case. If all roads run through one central media channel, then any investigator has to ask whether the story was independently emerging from multiple directions or being amplified through a single narrative hub. Fourth, at least one report is extremely weak. Case number 3 barely gives us anything. Fifth, the story went viral fast. When a case spreads quickly, contamination becomes a real issue. People hear the details, they repeat the details, they reinterpret memories through the emerging story. That doesn't mean anyone is lying, it means the information environment becomes polluted fast. That may be the most important lesson from the Ohio flap. The faster a mystery goes viral, the harder it becomes to separate original observation from cultural echo. Then, May 3rd happened. Now here's where the story gets another layer. After the March flap had effectively closed, new reporting surfaced on May 3rd, just 2 days ago, describing renewed claims in Northeast Ohio, alleged massive footprints, eerie howls, and continued activity in the broader Akron-to-Youngstown corridor. The New York Post reported that residents had come forward with alleged footprint photos, and that Mike Miller, co-founder of the Ohio Night Stalkers Bigfoot Research Group, was involved in investigating activity on the ground. This is important, not because it proves Bigfoot, not because a footprint photo automatically solves the case. Footprints can be hoaxed. Audio can be misidentified. Later reports can be influenced by earlier media attention. But the May 3rd update matters because one of the biggest criticisms of the March flap was the lack of physical evidence. No photos, no casts, no documentation, no tracks from the main window. Then, 2 months later, the story shifts from people only claim sightings to now people are circulating alleged footprint photos and recordings. That doesn't close the case. It reopens the question though. Are these later claims connected to the March flap? Are they independent follow-up? Are they new activity? Are they the predictable result of a viral Bigfoot story drawing attention to the area? Or are they the first pieces of physical evidence that should have been found from the beginning? That's why the May 3rd update is worth watching closely. It doesn't rescue the March reports from all their weaknesses. It does give investigators a new thread to pull. And sometimes, in cases like this, the thread matters more than the headline. If I were building the skeptical case against the Ohio Bigfoot flap, I would start with 5 points. No clear photos, no video, no casts from the main March 6 through 10 window, reports flowing primarily through one outlet, a viral information environment that may have shaped later reports. That is a strong skeptical case, strong enough that nobody should walk away saying this proves Bigfoot. It doesn't. But the skeptical case also has to be careful, because not proven does not mean nothing happened. A mother and a daughter still reported something in the road. 2 hikers still reported something near Headwaters Trail. A homeowner who didn't believe in Bigfoot still reported something crossing near her property. A named witness still went on record saying he saw something bigger than a person, hairy and Sasquatch looking. So the honest position is not blind belief. It's not lazy dismissal either. The honest position is tension. The Ohio flap is too weak to count as proof, too centralized to accept uncritically, too unusual to dismiss with a shrug. That's where I land. The Ohio setting matters too. Ohio has a long history of Bigfoot-style reports, often tied to what people call the Grassman. Salt Fork State Park has been a major hotspot with dozens of documented sightings since the 1980s, and that the Portage County corridor sits near the kind of agricultural and forested fringe habitat often associated with Ohio sightings. That doesn't authenticate the 2026 flap, but it means the setting is not random. For people who follow Bigfoot reports, Ohio is not some bizarre outlier. It's part of the larger map. Forested corridors, wetlands, rural edges, roads cutting through dark tree lines and swamps, places where human development and wilderness meet. Those are the places where stories like this tend to appear. Whether that tells us something about animal movement, human psychology, folklore, or something stranger is the real question. Final verdict. So what are we looking at here, really? Maybe this was a chain of misidentification, amplified by weather, timing, attention, and a centralized reporting funnel. That explanation has real force. Warmer weather could have put more people outside. Viral attention could have made people more alert. A single reporting hub could have shaped the story's momentum. Normal animals, shadows, people in dark clothing, startled perception could explain more than believers want to admit. But even after you grant all of that, something unsettling remains. People saw something. Not just hardened believers chasing a legend through the trees. A skeptic through her window, a mother and a daughter in a car, hikers close enough to smell something musky in the air, a named witness who didn't present himself as a Bigfoot fanatic. That's what gives this flap its weight. Not certainty, not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Weight, the kind that stays with you after the headline fades, after the social media frenzy dies down, after the skeptics have made their best arguments and the believers have made theirs. Because the most disturbing mysteries are not always the ones that are fully proven. They're the ones that leave behind just enough doubt to keep breathing. The Ohio Bigfoot flap of March 2026 may never become the case that proves Bigfoot exists, but it may become something almost as valuable for investigators. A case study in how modern monster reports are born, how they spread, where they break down, and why some witnesses still refuse to let the mystery be explained away. Maybe everyone misidentified something. Maybe the story got bigger than the evidence. Maybe the May 3rd footprint and audio claims will collapse under scrutiny. Or maybe Northeast Ohio gave us a brief glimpse of something that moves through the margins close enough to terrify witnesses, but never close enough to be captured cleanly. That's the ground we love to walk on. Bigfoot encounters are famous for one infuriating trait. People report them all the time, but clear photos and videos are vanishingly rare. And among the Sierra Nevada, we are building our own answer to that mystery. Our game explores why these beings are almost never captured cleanly. Not because the witnesses are stupid, but because the encounter itself is designed to break before certainty can set in. We're a small, independent, family-run game studio. And here, and among the Sierra Nevada, we're building a survival horror game born from this exact tension. Our fascination with Bigfoot, wilderness, mystery, and the terrible possibility that something intelligent may be watching from just beyond the trees. This channel is where that passion takes shape. We investigate real cases, we weigh the evidence, we listen to the witnesses, we challenge the weak points, then we pour that atmosphere, that awe, that fear, the uncertainty, the feeling of being hunted by a question you cannot answer into the world we're creating. So if this is your kind of mystery, Wishlist Among the Sierra Nevada on Steam. For a small family-run studio like ours, that support means a great deal. And it's a world you're absolutely going to fall fearfully in love with. Subscribe to the channel if you want more investigations like this, more Bigfoot research, more survival horror development, and more behind-the-scenes looks at the game as it grows. Because some mysteries don't end where the sighting is over. Sometimes that's exactly where they begin. Among the Sierra Nevada, the view is breathtaking. So is what's watching you.